Should you play Mistria in early access? Should you wait till full launch, or should you not play it at all? That's what we're going to determine in this video today. I'm about 25 hours into this game and I have a lot to say. This video will help determine if this game is for you, and as always, if you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe. Since I've obviously got 25 hours, I think you can tell that I have had a good experience playing this game. Otherwise, with my attention span, I would have quit around hour 5 or 6. Do I have some critiques? Yes, but I do constantly keep in mind that this is early access, and so a lot of these things might already be in the works to be changed. Before we hop into the specifics, let's talk about the art style and the gameplay overall. The art style does feel very 90s, anime, SNES inspired, but also with 2024 standards. Very detailed and cute pixel art. It really makes you connect with the game. It's going to make you want to spend time making your farm look nicer because the cosmetics are so good and the world overall just feels like a place that you can really get immersed into. As for the story and the characters, a lot of times I hate the dialogue in these types of games because it feels like a necessary evil, but I actually look forward to the dialogue. There are so many little touches, like when you donate something new to the museum, certain characters will bring up that item and what they think about it. So it's not like you're in this world with these characters, but then you're doing all these side quests and missions that have no relevance to the actual town. They bring those factors in. Also, the dialogue is just very overall animated, and they even have some little reaction animations like this, which just make it feel very lively. The other thing I will say is that in a lot of the story and the quests, they take the townsfolk and make them actually part of it. For example, if there's any construction required in a quest, Rias is part of it. If there's anything spooky and magical, Juniper's there. So you really get to know and feel like the characters are impacting the town and the quest, which is something really different from other games. If I had to make one critique for the story, it is that it does move rather quickly and it feels like you complete some big ticket items very early in the game. My opinion on that may change as they add more features to the game, because maybe I won't be so fixated on the storyline and quest when there is more to do, but it's just something that I want them to hopefully consider and maybe make some of those early milestones a little grander or take a little bit longer. I tried to approach this review from the aspect, if I was gonna buy an early access game, what would I truly want to know? So the first thing I would want to know definitely is, because it's early access, there's bound to be some improvement, bug fixes, all that. How does the game play? In my personal experience, I have had little to no issues. I will link in the video description a full changelog because there are some things that were causing some crashes occasionally, characters to disappear on Fridays, things like that, which is bound to happen in any game. But overall, I had almost no issues. Maybe a little bit of lag on the weather days, but I immediately changed my accessibility settings to make the weather less prominent, and A, it's just less distracting for me personally, but B, I found that I had no issues with lag after that. So if you're wondering, is this game just going to be frustrating to play in early access because it's so buggy, crashes all the time? No, they definitely did their quality control and functionality tests, because in comparison to some games that are early access that literally just don't work, overall, very good. Next, I want to talk about how the game actually plays and what the difficulty is like. You would expect it to play very similar to other farm sims, but actually it kind of plays more like an RPG with a farm sim factor to it, which to me is very refreshing. You could spend all your time on the farm, don't get me wrong, and that's great, but even the way the cave system, the combat system, and the characters are, it just feels like a very RPG adventure-esque game. Even the music that they've chosen and the way the town is set up, it kind of feels like an early Final Fantasy type of town where it's really mystical, and that the town doesn't just exist so that you have a place to farm and buy supplies, but you exist to help the town grow. And the town has its own lore and story, and you're just like a small part of it. So that's kind of a flip from tradition, and it feels really exciting. Another thing that adds to that is the inclusion of the dragon and that there's magic. I will talk about magic a little bit more in depth later, but again, it's almost like you discover this cool little town in an RPG and then just decide to stay there and become a part of the community. When we talk about the difficulty of this game, I don't really like comparing games to each other all the time, but because everybody is going to compare this to Stardew Valley, I will say that it does feel a little bit easier than Stardew Valley. There's a lot of things that are less punishing, and at first I was kind of irritated by those things because I do like a challenge, and for some reason I do like when I'm punished for making gameplay errors, but as soon as I got used to that, it was actually a very welcome change because then I could just enjoy what I was doing and not worry about min-maxing and optimizing every decision. So it is a little bit more relaxing, but there is still a lot of things to accomplish. So it's not like there's no challenge to the game. That is definitely not the case. There are some factors that add a little bit of complexity to the game. For example, the essence system, which I will talk about in a little bit, and the combat is actually pretty advanced and engaging. And I think some people might find that part a little bit more difficult, but actually farming and making money and kind of doing the day-to-day stuff is a little less stressful than other farm sim games. I wanted to mention this because when I play a farming sim game, I look for very complete days, especially early. If I feel like I've done everything there is to do in one day and then just go to bed by 4 p.m. every day, I am immediately disengaged from the game because I feel like there's just not enough to it. I did not feel that way at all. Almost every day I was going to bed or even passing out, and that indicates that there's just a lot of substance to the game. There's a couple areas of the game that in my playthrough I have hardly touched so far, such as fishing, archaeology, and so if I was to spend a little bit more time on those things, the days would be even more full. So if you're worried that there's just like not enough to do in this game, especially with it being early access, I don't think you'll find that. I will say the areas that I did focus on, I've always been a big cave exploring, mining person. I always just gravitate to that aspect of the game. I did get to level 60 in the mines, and that's as far as it goes right now. So I would like a little bit more there, but I know that is yet to come. And because it is tied to another mechanic, the magic, which again, we'll talk about, I kind of don't mind that they're going to take their time developing this because I think they're probably going to get feedback from players of what other magic they would like to see in the game, or maybe they already have it planned and I'm just hoping that we'll have some input. All right, let's talk about the specific mechanics of this game that I think really do set it apart from other games. Let's start with the purple essence that I mentioned just a little bit ago. I really love it. It feels impactful, not daunting, but rewarding. So as you complete tasks like chopping down a tree, harvesting crops, you get these little random essence drops that just build up, and you don't have to do anything about them until you talk to a dragon statue, where you can put some of those essence points into, for example, mining, combat, farming, and it will give you little perks. Now, most of them don't feel game changing, which is good, but they almost all feel impactful. I do think there is a few that they might want to change. For example, there's a combat perk that if you don't buy it between level 20 and level 40 in the mines, it's almost kind of useless. Basically, it makes one of the enemies, instead of debuff you, it buffs you. So that's fine if they leave it, but I do think it could be something a little bit more universal. So there are a few perks that I think maybe need to be revisited. And then there's one perk that is almost overpowered, and I wonder if they could just change it a little bit. So it's when you harvest some crops, you might get a rare drop. You might get a drop of a dish that it makes into later with cooking. So I think in the first year, they should limit what drops to be not so strong, because I've got some very expensive and strong dishes. However, the flip side to that is you do need to utilize food and cooking quite a bit in this game. So maybe it is just fine. It didn't feel like it put me so far ahead when I got a bunch of those rare food drops, but just something to make it a little bit more challenging early game. But overall, the purple essence system, I really, really enjoy. It makes each playthrough even feel a little bit more customizable, and that is very good for replayability. Let's talk about the magic system. So I will say when I played the demo for this game, I was a little bit hesitant on the magic. They obviously unlocked some of it very early because it's only a 3 in-game day demo, but I felt like it was going to be so overpowered and almost take the challenge out of the farming. But now that I see it implemented in the full game, I feel so much differently. The magic is tied, so far anyways, to your progression in the mines, and you keep unlocking more and more powerful spells. And the mana system, I think, is very fair and does add a little bit of complexity. So each day you recover a quarter of a mana orb. So it takes about a week to recover 2 full mana orbs, which already I have a spell that costs 2 mana. Each time you get a new spell so far, you also do get another mana orb, so eventually you should be able to use more and more magic. There is also limited ways to restore your magic, so I think it makes it very intentional and impactful when you use your spells. Another mechanic that is introduced very early is the Saturday market. And so it is cool because once a week you have an opportunity to buy cosmetics, food items, and in the future there's going to be other things. So I have a feeling there will be weapons for sale, armor, charms, things like that it kind of enhance your combat. Maybe some rare items that only come once a year. I think there's a lot they could do with this market. My one critique with the market is the characters in the market look so cool that I want them to be part of the town. Again, it's early access and people are already talking about, for example, Ulrich and my personal favorite, Mary, to be romanceable characters. So I think it would be very cool, and this is something I hope they do, is that one or more of the Saturday market folks end up moving to Mistria, maybe at a certain heart stage or something like that. Why I think this might be planned, because outside of Mistria to the east, there is kind of like a broken down building, and I have a feeling that that is set up for something later, which could easily be a house or another business or something like that. So I hope they utilize it for another character, because I think they've done such a good job with the world building. That would be great. Also in that area, there is so much room where they could make another house. So I kind of hope the town does expand. I'll talk about the skills quickly because there are a lot of different things you can focus on to make money in Mistria, and the skills, I have not even explored nearly in depth as many as I probably could have yet, and that is really exciting because it shows that there's a lot of different ways to play the game, and whatever the things you find most fun, like bug catching or fishing or archaeology, combat, farming, animal care, any of those things, you can really get deep into the skill trees, and overall, I feel like it's very rewarding. So most of the things in this game, as I said, I think the difficulty is a little lower than other games, which I actually appreciate, but there are 3 things that are pretty punishing right now, and I think that is needed to add some complexity to the game. Crafting is not immediate. You do have to spend some time to craft items. I think that is kind of an interesting time mechanic because you actually do have to time manage yourself better if you do want to craft a lot of items. It's not so punishing that you can't do anything else, but you definitely have to work it into your day, and you can't start half an hour before the end of the day trying to craft a million items for the next day because you actually just won't have the time. The next thing that's really punishing that I actually love is passing out at 2 a.m. So if you pass out at 2 a.m., not only do you take an energy and an HP penalty, but you actually don't wake up until 10 a.m. And I think that's a very fair trade-off, because when I was in the mines, to get to that next multiple of 5 floor, it was worth it to pass out because the mines do take a while to get through, and it was worth it to me to pass out and sacrifice some of the next day. But alternately, on other days, I made sure I was home by 2 a.m. so that I wouldn't get the penalty. So again, there's some decision-making, time management that I think overall is just fun. And then the last thing that is just kind of punishing is you need a lot of wood in this game, and I find that the wood collection is quite difficult. You don't get a ton of wood from each tree. This is something that I actually think they could maybe tweak a little bit, add 1 or 2 pieces of more wood per tree that you chop down, but I found that it has been really difficult, or I have to spend days and days and days trying to collect the wood. And maybe that's intentional, so it kind of slows down your progress a little bit. But I do think that it is way more punishing than collecting stone. So I'm not sure what the future of that will look like, but it is a little difficult. All right, our last two topics to talk about is my critiques for the game and my thoughts on the roadmap and the future of this game. So let's start on the critiques. Again, because it's early access, a lot of these things might already be in the works to improve or fix or add, but I have to mention them because if you are thinking about playing this game, I think it's worth knowing these things. I kind of mentioned that one of my critiques was that the gameplay moves along really quickly. I think that more incremental town repairs between the large ones might just feel more impactful and more rewarding. I think if the story completes too quickly, unless they're planning on adding so much story later, I think that it might be a little bit of a miss. I typically like in a farming sim when all the main storylines take about a year and a half to 2 years to complete, because even with how your farm progresses, you don't have that much money early that while you're still building your farm, it's nice to have storyline quests to do. That might just be a personal preference, but I just wanted to share that. I also think the museum could do a little bit of tweaking because it just feels like you're donating items and it's hard to know like which sets you're about to finish. And it just feels like maybe there is a better way to set up the museum. I also think that they could maybe introduce some of the museum packages a little bit more slowly so that it kind of gives you a guide of the first couple to complete. Most of the spring packages I didn't even complete because I didn't really feel like the urgency, and maybe that's my first time playing through that was the problem, but even if you had to complete 3 or 4 bundles and then that triggered a town repair to expand the museum and open up more of the wings, it just feels like that would be a better progression for the game. Some of my other critiques are the pickaxe aiming and pickaxe energy system, and to some extent even the watering aiming. Sometimes I feel like where my cursor should be aiming with the pickaxe, it actually aims somewhere slightly different, which just is irritating. When you're in the mines and you're running out of time, you need to be very precise with which rocks you're breaking. And so that was one thing that I do think they could do a little bit better of a job on. And even the combat a little bit. I feel like after I use a special move with my sword that it's not intuitive where I land and where I'm aiming. So a lot of times I take a lot more damage than I feel like I should with the combat. Another critique I have is more information on the UI. I think that when you scroll over something on your item bar at the bottom, that it should say what it is, especially if it's food or an item that's useful, because sometimes you just want a quick glance of, you know, what you're looking at, what it does, especially when you grab new items. Sometimes you want just like a quick glance without pausing the game. And so I think that's something that hopefully they are going to add. And I just think it makes the game a little bit more user-friendly and accessible. I really like the skill system and how you level up so naturally all these skills, but I do think when you hit an important level, for example, level 15 on any skill, there should be a bigger indication than the standard little pop-up that goes above your character's head. I think it should do something a little bit more impactful so that you realize that there's maybe the next step. For example, you unlock the next round of the skill tree. So I think they could just make that a little bit more celebratory because it is a big deal. Last thing I'm going to comment on is the roadmap. So I'm going to put a link to the early access page, which includes the roadmap so you can read everything. But the next thing that is coming, and that's going to be in the last quarter of this year, 2024, is more hard events with the villagers. There will be no marriage yet. They're also going to add some more NPC dialogue. There is going to be new enemies and cosmetic drops in the mines. The town is going to have some more requests, some more museum content, and a new festival, which is very needed. The festival they do have in the game is actually unreal. I hope they use that template for all festivals to make them very interactive. In this first festival, the first year you're not going to unlock the top prizes, which I love. I love when the festivals build on itself and you get better and better stuff every year. So I hope that they implement that in the rest of the game. There's going to be skills and perks raised from level 30 to level 45. Again, I think that's a really, really cool mechanic to the game. So that's going to be great. I hope the next round of skills and perks are really expensive, but then really powerful. There's also going to be another home upgrade and player and animal cosmetics, as well as furniture and decor. This is something the game does really strong, so I know that they're going to make this a focus. Long term, they're going to add way more to the mines and dungeons, more unlockable spells, more quest lines. They're also going to introduce marriage and children. There's going to be additional Saturday market vendors. I think they said there's going to be up to 8, which is awesome. Then there's going to be more skill caps, more perks. There's going to be more home and farmland upgrades, pets and ability to ride large animals, more festivals, more quests. There's a lot coming. I'm assuming that all of this won't be done within the first year by early access. I have a feeling it's going to take probably a year and a half, if not a little longer, to get all this stuff added, unless they've built a lot of it but just haven't had time to, code it, implement it, quality test it. Maybe it's coming sooner than we think, but overall this game is just going to get more and more robust, which is great. They also did indicate on the website that there is even more to come that's not listed here, and I think if this game does really well, which it has already, they will just continue to add. I really hope for some long-term future downloadable content. I know I would gladly pay if they added a new town in the future, some new mines or quests that are outside of what we already have. Like, there's so much they could do with this game, and I think this game deserves to be a very large scope game. So let's hope that it continues, but for now, I do recommend playing the early access. I will easily start another farm and play through this one again, even in the early access stage. So I think it's worth it. Let me know if you've played it yet, or if you're planning on playing it in the comments. Any other questions you have about the game? What kind of content would you like to see for this game while it's in early access? I'll try to make it happen.